Welcome to the Majestic Truth Podcast. Join us as we delve into the mysteries of the universe, explore the unexplained, and shed light on some of the most important events that have occurred and are occurring in our world today. Get ready to open your mind, expand your horizons, and discover the extraordinary. This is the Majestic Truth Podcast. And now your host, Michelle.
Welcome aboard, Truth Seekers. Fasten your seatbelts and prepare for an unforgettable ride. Together we'll question, explore, and embrace the majesty of truth. I'm so grateful you're here today. So, in light of the House Oversight Committee hearing that took place this week, I had to put out a special report and cover the events that took place during that hearing, as this hearing is one for the history books. This show's introductory episode will be on Tuesday, August 1st, where I go into a little more depth about the show's purpose and a little about myself. But for now, I know you're all really anxious to hear a recap and some sound bites from the hearing. If you want to check out more information on the official show launch on August 1st, head on over to majestictruth.com/podcast. So this episode is a pre-launch episode, since I just couldn't wait until next week to cover this extremely important hearing for the UFO and truth seeker community. Brief intro here for any newcomers wondering who was presenting to the committee. First, we have the whistleblower David Grush, an intelligence officer for 14 years. He was the co-lead in unidentified anomalous phenomena and transmedium object analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP task force and eventually the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, also known as ARROW. Our second whistleblower to testify is David Fravor, a retired commander in the U.S. Navy. He was the commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. He was stationed on board the USS Nimitz when the Tic Tac videos were recorded. Our third whistleblower is Ryan Graves, a former F-18 pilot with over a decade of service in the U.S. Navy, including 2 deployments in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Inherent Resolve. First, let's take a moment to recognize their bravery, not just at this hearing, but for serving in our nation's military. Thanks to the 3 of them for their service. All 3 of these men have courageously gone on the record with their accounts and their spoken truth. We're going to walk through this hearing and point out the highlights as we go. The hearing chairman was Glenn Grothman from Wisconsin. All right, loading up the sound bites here. The first clip I captured here was Chairman Grothman speaking about the lack of transparency regarding UAPs.
The lack of transparency regarding UAPs has fueled wild speculation and debate for decades, eroding public trust in the very institutions that are meant to serve and protect them, as is evidenced by the large number of people we have here. I also want to point out in 1966, President Gerald Ford claimed to have seen a UFO, and in 1969 in Georgia, Jimmy Carter claimed to have seen a UFO.
So the chairman nails it here, stating the ruining of public trust in the institutions meant to serve and protect them has been brought about by this lack of transparency. Then he adds to the mix President Ford in 1966 and in 1969, Jimmy Carter had both claimed to see UFOs themselves. He goes on further to state that these events throughout history have led Congress to establish entities to investigate, like ARROW and ATIP and others. Now, the chairman goes on to state one of the purposes of this hearing.
Today we'll see clarity from these witnesses' testimonies, or we'll seek clarity as to what can be done to improve reporting for military and civilians and remain committed to objective inquiry. Congress should work to ensure that knowledge is not driven by fear. Today we are not just debating the existence of UAPs, we are deliberating on the principles that define our republic, which is a commitment to transparency and accountability. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about ways we can improve government efficiency and openness when it comes to UAPs.
That's exactly what we are looking for. Now the chairman turns it over to Representative Tim Burchett from Tennessee. I love this guy. I wanted to play this quote from Tim Burchett that he reads from George Knapp, the investigative reporter extraordinaire, and one of the hosts from Coast to Coast AM.
Mr. Knapp wrote, since 1969, the position of our military has been that UFOs pose no threat to national security and are not worthy of further study. I'd say that's the biggest understatement of the decade. He also goes on to talk about the dismissive attitude. It's at odds with what was revealed in documents, reports, and internal memos.
UFOs pose no threat to national security. Understatement of the decade, indeed. Burchett now thanks the three brave witnesses.
But also, finally, I'd like to thank these three brave witnesses here. They took an oath. They took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and dadgummit, they're doing it. And we owe them a debt of gratitude.
Amen to that. After that, Mr. Burchett mentions the amazing movie Accidental Truth because the witnesses appeared in that film, which we do a full movie review on later in August. So look out for that and be sure and check out this incredible film. Burchett goes on to speak about the roadblock with trying to get the truth out to the American people.
We've run into roadblocks from members from the intelligence community, the Pentagon. I proposed legislation to go in the FAA reauthorization that just said if an airline pilot has a sighting, that when he makes that report to the FAA, that it would come to Congress. But I was told that the intelligence community did not like that, and the amendment was not even heard in committee. I think it's time for this country to take back our country. We need to tell the folks at the Pentagon they work for us. Dadgummit, we don't work for them.
Darn right they work for us. So well said here. And here's more from Burchett. It's just so good.
And that's exactly the point. This is an issue of government transparency. We can't trust a government that does not trust its people. We're not bringing little green men or flying saucers into the hearing. Sorry to disappoint about half y'all. We're just going to get to the facts. We're going to uncover the cover-up, and I hope this is just the beginning of many more hearings and more people coming forward about this.
And so do we. I love the statement he made. We can't trust a government that does not trust its people. So powerful and so true. Now we hear from Congresswoman Anna Luna. She opens with discussing the difficulties presented to those wanting to come forward with the things they have witnessed, and also how the committee has been stonewalled when trying to find out the truth.
Even more alarming is the fact that these eyewitnesses are many of times service members and have no assurance that their lives will not be negatively impacted or even harmed by their experiences. In being an active duty service member working on an airfield, I've had conversations with many pilots where they were in fear of coming forward for retribution and or being taken off flight status. How do we know this? Because the government has said nothing to assure us otherwise. They have also did nothing to calm the concerns of over 20% of Americans who have reported to have seen UFOs or UAPs. We are simply told not to question the government and that the government has it under control. Today is the first hearing of its kind where we will attempt to get down to the bottom of what is actually happening with UAPs. But we will hear from people who have had personal sightings rather than Pentagon bureaucrats who have always been sent to stonewall our investigations. Just so that the press knows and the people know, we were even denied access to a classified briefing in a SCIF prior to this hearing due to the amount of hoops that we had to jump through to grant temporary clearance to witness Grush, who has knowledge of classified information. It is time to have an open-minded discussion on this topic, to hear the evidence and understand the magnitude of what this means not just for our nation, but for humanity.
Now, for some in the audience who may not know what a SCIF is, and I want to say this because it is referenced throughout the hearing, a SCIF, SCIF, stands for Sensitive Compartmented Information Facility. It's a term for a secure room. This type of room will guard against electronic surveillance and suppress data leakage of sensitive military and security information. Okay, now that we covered that. Next up after Luna is Congressman Robert Garcia.
Now, our witnesses will testify today that UAPs have posed a serious safety threat, and we must understand this. More broadly, we're dealing with real questions that get to the heart of our faith in government. Faith in our institutions, as we all know, is at an all-time low. Partisanship and alternative facts make it too easy to doubt narrative or our institutions.
Sensing a theme here, right? Faith in our institutions is something that's at stake here. The public wants answers. Yes, we do. Garcia goes on to say this.
We know that whistleblowers have reported harassment, intimidation, or stigma as well, and this is not acceptable. If people can't report incidents which would have national security or safety implications, then that also has serious consequences for us. As ranking member of this subcommittee, I know my job would be completely impossible if whistleblowers or others feel intimidated to come before this committee. We can't be afraid of asking questions, and we can't be afraid of the truth.
We can't be afraid of asking questions, and we can't be afraid of the truth. Right on, Garcia, right on. Now we hear from Congressman Jared Moskowitz.
For decades, many Americans have been fascinated by objects mysterious and unexplained, and it's long past time that they got some answers. The American public has a right to learn about technologies of unknown origins, non-human intelligence, and unexplainable phenomena. Those are not the words of a UFO Twitter account, though that is a direct quote from Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, that the American public has a right to learn about technologies of unknown origins, non-human intelligence, and unexplainable phenomena.
The American public not only has a right, we demand to know. And here's the ongoing theme rearing its head again: transparency.
For me, this hearing is about transparency. We unfortunately live in a time in which many people distrust government and our institutions. And overclassification of information away from the American public or even Congress contributes to today's politics.
1,000% correct here. Now the hearing moves on to introduce the witnesses, and onto starting with former F-18 pilot Ryan Graves from the U.S. Navy's opening statement. Let's play some clips from his opening statement, starting with this.
I have experienced advanced UAP firsthand, and I'm here to voice the concerns of more than 30 commercial aircrew and military veterans who have confided their similar encounters with me. Today, I would like to highlight 3 critical issues that demand our action. As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine. Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers whose lives depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena. The stigma attached to UAP is real and powerful and challenges national security. It silences commercial pilots who fear professional repercussions, discourages witnesses, and is only compounded by recent government claims questioning the credibility of eyewitness testimony. Parts of our government are aware of more about UAP than they let on, but excessive classification practices keep crucial information hidden. Since 2021, all UAP videos are classified as secret or above. This level of secrecy not only impedes our understanding, but fuels speculation and mistrust.
There's that theme again: mistrust in government. He now goes on to describe his encounters with UAPs.
In 2014, I was an F-18 Foxtrot pilot in the Navy Fighter Attack Squadron 11, the Red Rippers, and I was stationed at NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. After upgrades were made to our jet's radar systems, we began detecting unknown objects operating in our airspace. At first, we assumed they were radar errors, but soon we began to correlate the radar tracks with multiple onboard sensors, including infrared systems, eventually through visual ID. During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, 2 F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sightings. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs.
So these sightings happen so frequently that they become part of their pre-flight briefs. Whoa. So because of the frequency of this, and because of the lack of a safe intake process of witness accounts of these events, Mr. Graves founded the Americans for Safe Aerospace. Here's what he had to say about that.
Recognizing the need for action and answers, I founded Americans for Safe Aerospace. The organization has since become a haven for UAP witnesses who were previously unspoken due to the absence of a safe intake process. More than 30 witnesses have come forward, and almost 5,000 Americans have joined us in the fight for transparency at safeaerospace.org. The majority of witnesses are commercial pilots at major airlines. Often, they are veterans with decades of flying experience. Pilots are reporting UAP at altitudes that appear above them at 40,000 feet, potentially in low Earth orbit or in the gray zone below the Kármán line. making inexplainable maneuvers like right-hand turns and retrograde orbits or J-hooks. Sometimes these reports are reoccurring, with numerous recent sightings north of Hawaii and in the North Atlantic. Other veterans are also coming forward to us regarding UAP encounters in our airspace and oceans. The most compelling involve observations of UAP by multiple witnesses and sensor systems. I believe these accounts are only scratching the surface, and more will share their experiences once it is safe to do so.
Safe to do so. My head is shaking right now. Mr. Graves, closing remarks.
In closing, I recognize the skepticism surrounding this topic. If everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issue this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are concerned for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies. It is long overdue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. We now hear from our second witness / whistleblower, David Grush, the intelligence officer for 14 years. Let's start with the audio soundbite of why Mr. Grush became a whistleblower.
I became a whistleblower through a PPD 19 urgent concern filing in May 2022 with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country, many of whom also have shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony to myself and my various colleagues. I have taken every step I can to corroborate this evidence over a period of 4 years while I was with the UAP Task Force and do my due diligence on the individual sharing it. This is because of these steps, I believe strongly in the importance of bringing this information before you.
Now Grush talks about his driving force in coming forward.
I am driven by a commitment of both to truth and transparency, rooted in our inherent duty to uphold the United States Constitution and protect the American people. I'm asking Congress to hold our government to this standard and thoroughly investigate these claims. But as I stand here under oath now, I am speaking to the facts as I've been told them.
Now Mr. Grush makes this statement.
I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it.
Whoa. So here he's admitting under oath that he was informed of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. Did you hear that? A multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. For those waiting for confirmation of whether or not we are alone here, there's your answer. We wouldn't have a UAP crash retrieval program if there was nothing to retrieve. And while we are talking about retrieving crashed UAPs, let's also wrap our head around, well, if they retrieved a crashed UAP, something or someone was most likely flying it, right? Unreal. So now Grush goes on to talk about how he suffered retaliation for coming forward.
I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower. As you know, I've suffered retaliation for my decision, but I am hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency.
I couldn't agree more, and we thank you, Mr. Grush. Next up is Commander David Fravor, and he gets right into his experience on the USS Nimitz, the famous Tic Tac incident.
On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air-to-air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. The controller had told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet, and the controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All four of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down and saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping-pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my Wizzo and I decided to go down and take a closer look with the other aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the tic-tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned it with my aircraft, and began to climb. We continued down another 270 degrees, nose low, where the tic-tac, or we considered 270 degrees to where, and we went nose low to where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingmen, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cap point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute. You can calculate the speed." We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to them, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar, and I can get into modes later if you're interested. What is shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated. None of my crew were ever questioned. Tapes were never taken, and after a couple days, it turned into a great story with friends. It wasn't until 2009 until Jay Stratton had contacted me to investigate. Unbeknownst to all, he was part of the ATIP program in the Pentagon led by Lou Elizondo. And there was an official report that came out that's now on the internet. Years later, I was contacted by the other pilot, Alex Dietrich, and asked if I'd been contacted, and I said no, but I'm willing to talk. I was contacted by Mr. Elizondo, and we talked for a short period of time, and he said we'd be in contact. A few weeks after that, I was made aware that Lou had left the Pentagon in protest and joined forces with Tom DeLonge, Chris Mellon, Steve Justice, and others to form Two Stars Academy, an organization that pressed the issue with leading industry experts and U.S. government officials. They worked with Leslie Kean, who is present today, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper to publish the articles in the New York Times 2017 New York Times, and it removed the stigma on the topic of UFOs, which is why we're here today. Those articles open the door for the government and public that cannot be closed. It has led to an interest from our elected officials who are not focused on little green men, but figuring out where these craft are, where they're from, the technology they possess, how do they operate. It also led to the Whistleblower Protection Act and the NDAA.
Now, here is a commander for the U.S. Navy's account of something extraordinary under oath. I mean, what he describes defies the laws of physics as we understand physics. Now, Commander Fravor says this.
There are multiple witnesses coming forward to say that have firsthand knowledge, and Mr. Grush just covered that. What concerns me is that there's no oversight from our elected officials on anything associated with our government processing or working on craft. Believe it not from this world. This issue is not a full public disclosure that could undermine national security, but it is about ensuring that our system of checks and balances works across all work done in the government using taxpayer funds. Relative to government programs, even unacknowledged WAVE programs have some level of oversight by the appropriate committee members in the House and Senate, and this work that is said to be occurring from whistleblower testimonies should not be exempt. In closing, I would like to say that the tic-tac object we engaged in 2004 was far superior to anything that we had on time, have today, or are looking to develop in the next 10 years. If we in fact have programs that possess this technology, it needs to have oversight from those people that the citizens of this great country elected in office to represent what is best for the United States and best for the citizens. I thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Oversight indeed. And this great committee is working towards accomplishing this. Thank you, Commander Fravor, for your bravery and your service. So now the committee moves on to questions. Mr. Graves is asked if he feels adequately trained and briefed on how to handle encounters with UAPs.
No. Right now, military witnesses to UAP have limited options for reporting UAP. But more concerning is that commercial aviation sector has not adapted to the lessons that the military has implemented. The military and Department of Defense has stated that UAP represent a critical aviation safety risk. We have not seen that same language being used in the commercial markets. They are not acknowledging this risk.
Now, Mr. Graves is asked what steps have to be taken to improve a pilot's ability to report a UAP.
Right now, we need a system where pilots can report without fear of losing their jobs. There is a fear that the stigma associated with this topic is going to lead to professional repercussions, either through management or perhaps through their yearly physical check. So having a secure system, reducing the stigma, and making this information available through the public is going to reduce the concerns that aircrew have.
No kidding. So ridiculous that they cannot properly report UAPs without fallout. Just crazy. How many reports have never been filed because of this? And how many opportunities have been lost to find out answers to what is occurring in our skies because of this? Next, Mr. Graves, can you tell us a reason why some of this stuff shouldn't be told to the public?
There's certainly some national security concerns when we use our advanced sensors in our tactical jets to be able to identify these objects. However, there's no reason that the objects themselves would be classified. I would be curious to see how the security classification guideline actually spells out the different nuances of how this topic is classified from the perspective of UAP, not national security.
Now, Mr. Fravor is asked what kind of reporting took place after the Tic Tac incident occurred.
None. We had a standard debrief where the backseaters went down to our carrier intel center and briefed what had happened, and that was it. No one else talked to us, and I was in the top 20 in the battle group. No one came. The captain was aware, the admiral was aware, nothing was done.
So, nothing was done. So this question is asked to the three witnesses. Do you believe UAPs pose a risk to national security? Commander Fravor answers.
Yes, and here's why. The technology that we faced was far superior than anything that we had, and you could put that anywhere. If you had one, you captured one, you reverse engineered it, you got it to work, you're talking something that can go into space, go someplace, drop down in a matter of seconds, do whatever it wants, and leave, and there's nothing we can do about it. Nothing.
Nothing we can do about it. Yeah, I'd say that poses a national security risk, wouldn't you? Mr. Graves weighs in as well to this question.
I would also like to add, from a commercial aviation and military aviation perspective, we deal with uncertainty in our operating space as a matter of our professional actions. Identifying friend from foe is very important to us. And so when we have unidentified targets and we continue to ignore those due to a stigma or a fear of what it could be, that's an opening that our adversaries can take advantage of.
Next question. What steps need to be taken to better understand and respond to UAP encounters in the interest of national security?
There needs to be a location where this information is centralized for processing, and there needs to be a two-way communication loop so that operators on the front end have a feedback and can get best practices on how to process information, what to do, and to ensure that their reporting is being listened to. Right now, there is not a lot of back and forth.
Now, a question for Mr. Grush. Regarding his complaint to the intelligence community inspector, what kind of information is being hidden, and do you think it should remain hidden?
Yes, I can speak to that very briefly in an unclassified manner. As you know, the preponderance of my complaint was classified to the intelligence communities. Both material acquisition and exploitation activity, also baselining the UAPs but not sharing it with intelligence professionals that are actually doing step briefs to pilots, that kind of information. Yeah.
Now, Congressman Garcia has a turn to ask questions, and he covers the issue of needing a central, safe place to report these instances of UAP encounters. Now, beyond a central reporting system, Garcia asks, is there anything else that can be done to encourage civilian reporting? And Graves responds.
I think we're doing it right now.
Okay, great.
I think this hearing is going to show the American people that their government takes this topic seriously.
Amen to that. Now, Mr. Garcia asked them to briefly describe the aircraft that are being witnessed that are outside the scope of our capabilities. Mr. Graves responds first with the following.
Yes, the objects that are being seen by commercial pilots are performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities as a country, and that applies for the military as well.
Now Commander Fravor responds.
Yeah, I concur with that. We have nothing that can stop in midair and go the other direction, nor do we have anything that can, like in our situation, come down from space, hang out for 3 hours, and go back up.
Now, Mr. Garcia asks David Grush if the government is in possession of UAPs.
Absolutely, based on interviewing over 40 witnesses over 4 years.
And where?
I know the exact locations, and those locations were provided to the Inspector General and some of which to the intelligence committees. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
So, Mr. Grush, is the government in possession of UAPs? Answer? Absolutely. Hello? Are we hearing this? So now the floor is passed to Congressman Burchett, and his question to Mr. Graves is, how do you know that this was not our aircraft?
Some of the behaviors that we saw in a working area, we would see these objects being at 0.0 Mach, that's zero airspeed, over certain pieces of the ground. So what that means, just like a river, if you throw a bobber in, it's going to float downstream. These objects were staying completely stationary in Category 4 hurricane winds. These same objects would then accelerate to supersonic speeds, 1.1, 1.2 Mach, and they would do so in very erratic and quick behaviors that I don't have an explanation for.
No, because they are not of this earth, right? They're extraterrestrial in nature. Burchett now asks Fravor about which of the flight capabilities of these Tic Tac craft that he saw astonished him the most.
The performance, absolute performance. It was.
And you're not aware of any other objects that anybody in the world has, in this world, that has those capabilities?
No, I think it's far beyond actually our material science that we currently possess.
Burchett now asks Mr. Grush if he has faced any retaliation for his coming forward.
Yeah, I have to be careful what I say in detail because there is an open whistleblower reprisal investigation on my behalf, and I don't want to compromise that investigation by providing anything that may help provide somebody information. But it was very brutal and very unfortunate, some of the tactics they used to hurt me both professionally and personally, to be quite frank. Yeah.
Extremely unfortunate that he has to deal with this for coming forward. Now the floor is passed to Congressman Raskin, and here he asks Mr. Graves if there are common characteristics to the UAPs that have been described by different pilots.
Certainly. We were primarily seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of a clear sphere.
I'm sorry, dark gray or black cubes?
Yes, inside of a clear sphere, where the apex or tips of the cube were touching the inside of that sphere. And that was primarily what was being reported when we were able to gain a visual tally of these objects. And that occurred over almost 8 years. And as far as I know, it's still occurring.
Now, Mr. Raskin asked Mr. Grush what his experience was like after he came forward.
Well, it's only been about 2 months or so I guess my experience has been overwhelming support from former colleagues of mine that have privately messaged me, and I do appreciate that. But I do have knowledge of active planned reprisal activity against myself and other colleagues, and it's very, very upsetting to me.
Coming from where?
Certain senior leadership at previous agencies I was associated with. And that's all I'll say publicly, but I can provide more details in a closed environment.
Grush also goes on to say that other co-workers of his were brutally, administratively attacked. Mr. Raskin asked Grush, how do you account for that response?
I call it administrative terrorism. That's their quiver, their tool in the toolbox to silence people, especially the career government service cares about their career, cares about their clearance, their reputation to climb the ladder. And when you threaten that career path, a lot of people back off. But I'm here to represent those people. So,
very brave. Administrative terrorism to silence people. Unbelievable and so wrong. Raskin now asks Mr. Fravor how his experience has been since coming forward.
Actually, I've been treated very well. And the 6 people that were involved, myself included, all of them have or will be retiring from the military as 05s or 06s. And all my friends that are very senior, 3 and 4 stars, I've talked to them. They believe They understand there's a problem, but no, I was actually treated really well.
Now, Raskin asks Commander Fravor's interpretation on these phenomena.
Well, I'll say, I'm not like a UFO fanatic. It's not me. But I will tell you that what we saw with 4 sets of eyes over a 5-minute period, still, there's nothing, we have nothing close to it. It was amazing to see. I told my buddy I wanted to fly it, but yeah, it's just an incredible technology.
We have nothing close to it. An incredible technology. Now we move on to Congresswoman Luna. She asked Mr. Grush if in the last couple of years, if he has had incidences that have caused him to fear for his life.
Yes, personally.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want everyone to note that he's coming forward in fear of his life. To put in perspective, if they were really not scared about this information coming out, why would someone be intimidated like that?
Scary stuff. Congresswoman Luna asked Mr. Graves to describe an incident that occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base.
Certainly. In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of Boeing contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard-sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event, I believe 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, there were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting off. And this is information that was received through one of the witnesses that have approached me at Americans for Safe Aerospace.
A red square hovering over one of the launch facilities. Graves then says this object was the size of a football field. Unreal. Now we go to Congressman Moskowitz. He asks about G-forces of the UAPs and asks if a human could survive those G-forces with known technology that we have today.
No.
No, not for the acceleration rates that we observed.
So that brings us to then, who would pilot them if not humans? And we don't have the technology to fly at those speeds anyway and do those maneuvers. And here's a clip of an exchange between Moskowitz and Mr. Grush that I left in its entirety.
Mr. Grush, as a result of your previous government work, have you met with people with direct knowledge or have direct knowledge yourself of non-human origin craft?
Yes, I personally interviewed those individuals.
Non-human origin craft. He says this under oath. Tim Burchett has this exchange with Grush about time frame of when did the U.S. first learn of actual evidence of extraterrestrials.
Has the U.S. government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial, otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I don't like to denote origin. Keeps the aperture open, both scientifically. Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
1930s. Wrap your head around that. 1930s. So they have been essentially covering up UFOs for well over 90 years. Insane. So later on in the hearing, there's this exchange between Congressman Burleson and Grush.
At one point, you had said that there has been harmful activity or aggressive activity. Has any of the activity been aggressive, been hostile in your reports?
I know of multiple colleagues of mine that got physically injured. And the activity, and I got
by UAPs or by people within the federal government?
both.
Okay, so there has been activity by alien or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
I can't get into the specifics in an open environment, but at least the activity that I personally witnessed, and I have to be very careful here, because they tell you never to acknowledge tradecraft, right? So what I personally witnessed, myself and my wife, was very disturbing.
I'm disturbed just hearing this. never mind experiencing it firsthand. So again, later on in the hearing, Congressman Gates speaks of test pilots who witness UAPs, and he then goes into discussing how they perceive coming forward if they have seen UAPs.
It was stated explicitly to me by these test pilots that if you have a UAP experience, the best thing you can do for your career is forget it and not tell anyone. Because any type of reporting, either above the surface or below the surface, does have a perceived consequence to these people, and that is a culture we must change if we want to get to the truth. Mr. Chairman, I would observe that perhaps as we move forward from this hearing, there are some obvious next steps. Every person watching this knows that we need to meet with Mr. Grush in a secure, compartmentalized facility so that we can get fulsome answers that do not put him in jeopardy and that give us the information we need. Second, I would suggest that the radar images that were collected of this formation of craft out of Eglin Air Force Base, and specifically the actual image taken by the actual flight crew that we can actually validate, be provided to the committee, subpoenaed if necessary, so that we're able to track how to get this type of reporting and analysis done in a more fulsome way. That would be my recommendation, humbly, as a guest here of the fine Oversight Committee. I yield back.
The perceived consequence of how you will be treated if you report on UAPs is definitely something that needs to change in order to get to the truth. His next steps are great as well and necessary to get the information needed to proceed with appropriate oversight. Up next is Congresswoman Mace. She has this exchange with the three witnesses.
And then do you believe there's an active disinformation campaign within our government to deny existence of UAPs, yes or no?
I don't have an answer to that.
As previously stated publicly, yes.
I think previously with like Project Blue Book, yes, but currently I don't speak for the United States government.
Okay, thank you.
So here Grush confirms that there is an active disinformation campaign by the U.S. government. Now Congresswoman Mace has this exchange with Commander Fravor regarding the Tic Tac UAP he saw.
A few questions for Mr. Favor. As an expert naval aviator, have you ever seen an object that looked and moved like the Tic Tac UAP?
No.
Did the Tic Tac UAP move in such a way that defied the laws of physics?
The way we understand them, yes.
Many dismiss UAP reports as classified weapons testing by our own government, but in your experience as a pilot, does our government typically test advanced weapon systems right next to multi-million-dollar jets without informing our pilots?
No, we have test ranges for that.
It took over 15 years for your encounter with the Tic Tac to be declassified. Do you feel there was a good reason to prevent lawmakers from having access to this footage?
No, I just think it was ignored when it happened, and it just sat somewhere in a file. Never got reported.
In a drawer. It happens a lot up here. Shocker.
Okay, Ms. Mace now has this exchange with Grush.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
Biologics came with some of these recoveries. Non-human biologics. Wrap your head around that. Next up is Congressman Langworthy. He asks Commander Fravor if it is possible that the Tic Tac was a product of any other nation on Earth.
No, I said, like I said earlier, I think it defies current material science and the ability to develop that much propulsion. And I know there's been some physicists have done calculations, which is beyond anything that we have.
Well, either the United States has an adversary here in this world that we don't know, or we really have some serious investigations to do. I really appreciate you being here. Is there anything else about the November 14th, 2004 incident that you think is important for this committee to know that you haven't been asked here today?
No, it's been said it's probably the most credible UFO sighting in history based on all the sensors that were tracking it, and then for us to get visual And to go against the naysayers that it's something on the screen or whatever, I mean, there's 4 sets of human eyeballs. We're all very credible. Of the 6 of us that were involved in the thing, including the video, every one of us is going to do 20 plus years in the military in very responsible positions. So I'd say the world needs to know that. It's not a joke.
No, it's not a joke. It's very, very serious and very, very concerning. Now, Congressman Ogles asks a series of questions to all 3 witnesses.
Is there any indication that these UAPs could be essentially collecting reconnaissance information? Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Mr. Grush?
Fair assessment, yeah.
Mr. Fravor?
Very possible.
Again, in the national security vein, is it possible that these UAPs would be probing our capabilities? Yes or no, Mr. Graves?
Yes.
Grush?
Yes.
Fravor?
Definitely.
Is it possible that these UAPs are testing for vulnerabilities in our current systems?
Yes.
Yes.
Possible.
Do you feel, based off of your experience and the information that you've been privy to, that these UAPs provide an existential threat to the national security of the United States? Mr. Graves?
Potentially.
Yes, sir, potentially.
Same answer, potentially.
Yeah, I'd say
Fravor?
definitely, potentially.
Mr. Graves and Fravor, in the event that your encounters had become hostile, would you have had the capability to defend yourself, your crew, your aircraft?
Absolutely not.
Sir?
No.
Is based off of the information that you've been privy to, is there any indication that these UAPs are interested in our nuclear technology and capabilities?
Yes.
By external observation, sure, that could be a fair assessment, yeah.
Yes.
Is there any indication that the Department of Energy is involved in UAP data collection and housing?
I don't have an answer.
I can't confirm or deny that in a public setting.
And could you do it in a secure setting?
Yes.
Mr. Fravor?
No, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'm the last member to go, but there clearly is a threat to the national security of the United States of America. As members of Congress, we have a responsibility to maintain oversight and be aware of these activities so that, if appropriate, we take action. I would encourage the chairman to demand that we have any and all, but in particular Mr. Grush, talk to us in a skiff. And if that access is denied, I will personally volunteer to initiate the Holman Rule against any personnel or any program or any agency that denies access to Congress.
So the Holman Rule would allow the House to fast-track proposals to gut government programs without debate. That was no small statement made by this congressman. The floor is now yielded back to Mr. Burchett, and he asked Mr. Grush the following.
Are you aware of any individuals that are participating in reverse engineering programs for non-terrestrial craft?
Personally, yes.
Do you know any that would be willing to testify if there were protections for them?
Certainly closed door and assurances that breaking their NDA, they're not going to get administratively punished for so.
Punished for telling the truth. So toward the end of the hearing, certain members were given an additional 3 minutes to do follow-up questions, and Mr. Raskin asked Commander Fravor if he formed any conclusions about what he experienced when he witnessed the Tic Tac UAP.
Yes, I think what we experienced was, like I said, well beyond the material science and the capabilities that we had at the time, that we have currently, or that we're going to have in the next 10 to 20 years.
He doesn't even think we will have these capabilities within the next 10 to 20 years. What a powerful statement indeed. All right, that was our last soundbite. So the next steps are, obviously we need to pass legislation and get some of these UAP documents declassified. And additional protections need to be provided for whistleblowers who are brave enough to come forward. And we need to have people held accountable who are in violation of our law. And we need to bring all of this into the light of truth. All right, truth seekers. That concludes this special report, breaking news episode of Majestic Truth. I hope you've enjoyed exploring the depths of the unknown with us today. Check out the full video of the House Oversight Committee hearing at oversight.house.gov. At the time of this recording, it's on the homepage. It's truly incredible, and you don't want to miss it. As always, remember the pursuit of truth and the quest for knowledge are ongoing journeys. So stay curious, stay open-minded, always follow your dreams, and keep seeking answers. Next week is our official launch episode, Tuesday, August 1st. Check out majestictruth.com/podcast to sign up to be notified of new episodes and updates. Thanks for joining me, Truth Seekers. I'm grateful for every listener and humbled by every subscriber. Don't forget to mark your calendars and set your alarms because our next episode will be available next Tuesday at 2 p.m. on your favorite podcast app. Trust us, you won't want to miss it. Until then, keep your eyes on the skies, your mind open, and remember, the truth is out there.
For updates, behind-the-scenes content, and a chance to engage with fellow truth seekers, stay connected with us on social media. Find us on Twitter at TruthSeekerPod, Instagram at Majestic Truth Seekers, and TikTok at Majestic Truth Seekers. Thanks for listening. Majestic Truth Podcast. For truth seekers only.